Greetings, St. Andrew family, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Emery James Museum at St. Andrew High School as we celebrate our virtual literary evening. I'm Margaret Record-Burnell, curator of the museum, which opened in April 2011. Here at this museum, we share the stories and experiences and reflections, the highs and challenges of our St. Andrew family in our anniversary year. The museum has shared, in addition to ongoing visits, a tradition of regular literary evenings in the museum or in the museum garden, promoting the writings and the output generally of our St. Andrew creatives. Our family of St. Andrew authors now number almost 100, and we've hosted over 20 literary events, among other happenings, since the museum's inception. This year, under the 95th anniversary's highly appropriate theme, Exploring New Territories, Embracing Change, our alumni and friends will again be celebrating, this time, like so many educational institutions of all levels, we have chosen to continue this tradition virtually and not be deterred by the many challenges in our way. Like the world we're presently in, it is one and the same time very changed, but very much united. We wish to underscore by continuing this hour of storytelling that we, like the rest of the world, are still working for change and working to make a life more abundant. This year, the museum theme for our hour of storytelling is Caring for our One Another. We welcome you to this sharing of experiences through the written word or the creative heritage. Please remember to share and to donate while this hour proceeds.
Good evening, everyone. It is my privilege and great pleasure to welcome you all to this entirely virtual literary event, showcasing the Emery James Museum of the St. Andrew High School for Girls, opened in 2011, and of which we are all so very proud. Without a doubt, it contains some aspects of our school's history to whet the appetites of all ages of the St. Andrew family. What better way to celebrate our 95th anniversary and homecoming week than by recounting some of the past events held there as we applaud Margaret Burnell, the conceptualizer, the creator, and the curator of our museum. Margaret and her team have crafted a retrospective PowerPoint of past readings and events held there that will certainly hold such wonderful memories for members and friends of the St. Andrew family of all ages over the years. Let us celebrate the legacy of St. Andrew High School as we hold strong on all fronts during these uncertain times, making indelible footprints as we aspire to the next 95 years. Thank you.
We build our school on thee, O Lord, to thee we bring our common need, the loving heart, the helpful word, the tender thoughts, the kindly deed. With these we pray, thy Spirit may Dear Lord, we pray thy spirit may be present in our school always. We change, but thou art still the same good master, teacher, friend. We change, but Lord, we bear thy name to journey with it to the end. And so we pray thy spirit may be present in our school always.
Great.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this, our 95th anniversary celebration, our literary evening, under the theme Caring for our One Another. It is my pleasure to have each and every one of you here this evening, and of course, our 15 St. Andrew High School authors. What a privilege we have today. I want to say thank you to all of you for participating and being here in attendance. You being here means so much to us. And I want to say a big thank you to our authors. You have left with us a legacy from the very young, 16, to our very not so young, but still forever young old girl at 86. I want to say thanks for sharing with us your literature, sharing with us your ideas, your inspiration that will live on long after we have left this earth. Thank you for your contribution to nation building. Thank you for all that you continue to do for our beloved SAHS, St. Andrew High School for Girls. This year we celebrate 95 years. 95 years of God's goodness and faithfulness to us. Our theme for this anniversary year is exploring new territories, embracing change. And what an appropriate theme for a time like this. We have the hope that we will conquer COVID. We will make it through this awful time that we're experiencing now. And in this time, many of you may even be inspired to write about it, so that years to come, our future St. Andrew High School girls will know that we went through this, but we experienced and continue to experience life more abundant. Thank you so much. Have a very good evening.
Hi, St. Andrew girls, old girls, young girls. I'm as proud as everybody else that we have reached this wonderful 95th anniversary of such an excellent school. St. Andrew really started me on my writing career, and I just give up praise to Mrs. Tess Thomas, who started me writing and encouraged me and, you know, made me realize that Caribbean authors were as good as anybody else, and that daffodils in England and snow were not the only things that you had to write about. I tried to do that myself when I was young and never having seen them. But just writing about local things, what you experienced, and that has carried through. So my 4 novels that I've written about Jamaica, called the SAHS series, are really all about Jamaica's many levels, layers, classes, races, patois, English, the wonderful combination that makes us who we are, food, the music, everything else. So it was a really wonderful experience writing them. And now Tony Hendricks and I have turned the SAHS series into pilot script for a TV series, which we are now attempting to sell. So while we move on with other projects, we're working on that too. So I wanted to introduce you, if you hadn't heard about my novels, the SAHS series. The first one is The Goat Woman of Largo Bay. The second one is The Man Who Turned Both Cheeks. Third one is The Sea Grape Tree.
And then the last one is the rhythm of the August rain in the series. So I just wanted to read a little bit from the last one, very first page. So Shadrach is a bartender, and he's always the hero of this series. He's a Jamaican bartender, been in jail a little bit, but really a good guy. A lot of common sense, very intelligent, and highly ambitious. So here we are with the first chapter of the rhythm of the August rain. God liked to play games with people, made the biggest things creep into their lives when they least expected them. If it wasn't so, Renford would have gotten a shout out before he climbed onto his bicycle to tell him a drunk driver was coming down the road. And somebody would have told Miss Maudie, hinted to her gentle-like, that she had won the lottery. It might have saved her the heart attack when she heard it on TV. But no, Shad was to reflect later. God liked to spin people around with a shock and see if they could walk straight, like a child about to pin the tail on the donkey. Like the boss after Shannon called. The news had fallen out of the clear blue sky. Shad had been minding his own business, wiping the dust and salt spray off the bottles behind the bar before any customers came in. The ocean had been drumming on the cliff below, and the breeze blowing through the bar's open sides as they always did. Even the tiny island sitting a quarter-mile offshore hadn't been doing much of anything. The mildewed buildings in the middle were sitting roofless and somber in the sun, the almond tree tossing its leaves now and again. The petite bartender had squatted down to reach the vodka and gin bottles under the sink, and since it had been a month since he had dusted, he had had to do more wiping than he had expected. Beads of perspiration had popped out on his bald head, and his once crisp white shirt was getting damp. Normally meticulous about his appearance, Shad had barely noticed. He had been brooding about an upcoming celebration, the one that surprised every man, no matter how far in advance he had been notified. He had just started talking himself into a positive attitude for the sake of the children, if nothing else, when the telephone in the bar had started to ring. Largo Bay Restaurant and Bar, he sang out after snatching up the receiver. Shadrach Myers, how are you? A woman said with an unmistakable lift to her voice. Shannon! Shad inhaled sharply through the gap between his front teeth. It's still cold in Canada, no? The woman laughed in her usual hearty way. No, it's June, remember. It's spring here. The flowers are out and everything. It's nice in Jamaica, too. Dry season. How's Bev? She good. Busy planning for us to marry next month. Is all she can talk about. Wedding, wedding, wedding. You would think we was young, not big old people with children. You're getting married? That's wonderful. The groom wagged his head in doubt. What day in July? She added, her voice more intense. Maybe I'll be there. Shad's hairless eyebrows shut up as he leaned on the counter. You mean you're coming back to Largo Bay? After 14 years, Shad, can you believe it? And thus starts the last book in the series about Shadrach Myers, the bartender. So I hope you get to read them. And I just want to say congratulations, St. Andrew, for surviving this long. I know you've been through ups and downs, and they've been really challenging times, financially, educationally, health-wise, but we're going to make it to 100, okay? Take care. Love you all.
Because once upon a time means something wonderful is about to happen. Storytelling is an adventure into the whole of civilization, into how people lived, what they believed in, what are the values that they lived by, how they managed to hold civilizations together, and how those were passed on. Storytelling for me conjures up memories and images of grandparents and grandchildren lovingly sharing personal stories, stories about the animal world. And I personally tell stories because I was raised on stories. My parents, who were country people and who were thought not to be educated, had a wealth of education and knowledge that they gained from their relationship with the environment. Today we have a word for that. We call it indigenous knowledge. And they spoke to us always in stories before I knew that there was something called stories. And the stories they've told have a tremendous impact on me. And then I've come to realize how much of our values and history reside in our stories. As a matter of fact, there's a Dutch Guyanese man, Ivan van Sertima, who wrote a book chronicling the journeys of the Africans before Columbus came, and that book is called They Came Before Columbus. And a great deal of what he discovered through the oral tradition of Latin America, where he did his research. So that's very important to me. And then I take to heart something said by a Nigerian writer, historian, philosopher, Chinwe Achebe, that the stories are our guides. Without them, we're like blind beggars stumbling in the dark.
You need to know the children. That is your target audience, what their interests are. But apart from that, you have to have passion. Really have to have a passion for what you're doing. And I gather there's some famous writers that did not like children. But I find, you do need to like children and feel what it is would you like them to know. What would you like to impart to them? So it's their interests, but also what can you give to them as well. You have to be really determined, not only to write and rewrite, as all writers do, but also I find in this environment, which means in this country, in the Caribbean, you're going to have to work pretty hard. Perhaps work is not the word, but not to ever cease trying to sensitize people to the importance of children's material, local, indigenous children's material, which doesn't mean that we are going to suddenly discard all the great children's books that we have from other parts of the world. Not at all. But the sensitization process needs to go on. Children need to see themselves in books. I think this is a very important psychological construct, if that's how we can put it. I never forget seeing in a magazine years ago when I was just first starting to write for children, a little African-American boy looking into a mirror, and he was dressed as Superman. And there's the other Superman there, and it's not him. And I have found over the years, and there are studies which will support this, that children, literary studies, that children do look for themselves. They keep turning through the pages of a book, trying to find themselves. Now, because we have been conditioned in these areas which are ex-colonial territories, and I'm not going to go to town on, ex-colonial is bad and all that. That's not what I mean. It's just that we've been conditioned to look into books and seeing people that don't look like us. And so we may think it's okay, but everything that we know about psychology, everything that we know about education, everything that we know about literature now says children must see themselves in books. It gives them an ownership of the material. It brings joy because, hello, I am important enough to be in a book. And that important enough to be in a book, interestingly enough, is one of the things that we still hold dear. It's similar to, if you look at You know, no matter how challenged economically the society is, you see parents with their little children all tidy, crisp, going off to basic school and primary school. We hold that there. And we also hold there that what is written in a book is important. So, if I'm not in there, clearly I'm not important. And it may seem like it's subtle and it's simple, but it is not. Because we do it in other areas, you know. We represent ourselves in music. We represent ourselves in athletics. We represent ourselves in art. We must represent ourselves in books.
This book is called Precious Leaves Paradise, and it's a children's book on Caribbean migration and the effects of migration on children in terms of the displacement and other feelings that children have whenever they move from place to place. Precious Leaves Paradise is a book which speaks to a child's view of paradise. So paradise can be wherever one wants it to be. Of course, I was thinking of Jamaica at the time because many years ago, actually maybe 30 odd years ago when I was doing my PhD, I packed up my two children, then two children, 6 and 3, and carted them off to the US. And I had a very Michelle Obama-esque moment when they, within a couple of weeks of getting there at school, they wrote a book and they were announced in their school as authors.
Yes.
And they wrote about leaving Jamaica and they did all the illustrations.
How many children do you have?
I now have 3 children because one was born at that time when I was there.
Right.
And but I took 2 little ones at the time, 6 and 3, and they wrote this little book. And I vowed then that I should find a way to document these children's feelings, because before then I was always just throwing them into the car, taking them here and there. And here were these 2 little ones telling me, hey, I felt displaced. These were my feelings. Yes. And I thought, given all that I have done in terms of the work on the barrel children phenomena, which we'll probably talk about later, I should find a way to document how children feel when they move from one country or one region to another. I focused on an island nation in particular because I think children feel a lot the way that adults feel, and I remember feeling very displaced and very discombobulated because a place like the metropole, anywhere in the metropole, whether it's the UK, London, New York, or Canada, or if you're moving from the Pacific Islands, or if you're moving from anywhere in Central America to go to another place, which is what is happening a lot with migration now and the refugees that are coming out. These individuals who talk about at a very academic level often don't document how children feel. And children feel very disrupted, children feel displaced. Very often children miss loved ones at home, and the way in which Caribbean migration takes place is that very often children experience 2 upheavals. One, when mother leaves, and in this case it's mother. We also have fathers leaving with the migrant workers, as we know.
Yes.
But in this case, with Precious leaving Paradise, Precious left mother first, or mother left her, and then afterwards she had to leave grandma. Or she had to leave caregiver.
Yes.
So often children experience 2 kinds of separation.
Right.
And very often our clinicians, our teachers, our parents don't realize the trauma
the impact.
that sometimes children take. The term the barrel child syndrome was coined by myself in the mid-80s.
Okay.
It came really from the ground, from the community, where the term barrel picnic was used to tease children when they were left behind by parents. However, I sought to give it a definitional framework and put it into its proper context, because it talks about children of migration.
Right, okay.
Not every child of migration is a barrel child.
Okay.
And not every, however, every barrel child is a child of migration, of course.
Okay.
And I defined it as children waiting to rejoin their parents in the metropole or any other country outside of where they're domiciled. They receive goods in barrels, or corrugated barrels, as we have here, displayed. It's a concept of displaying the barrel, which came from a artist at
Right.
the Edna Manley School.
Okay.
And what it shows, it was called Love in a Barrel. The fact is, these barrels are filled with material goods,
yes.
which the children sometimes sell, sometimes the caregivers sell them to compensate for lack of income from the parent. The reality, though, is that the barrel child lacks the emotional nurturance that they need. Just asking those who are doing the service providing out there to listen to us researchers and to do something about it. So we're talking about moving to policy now.
Yes.
Those children who are in the school system, please let us see if we can listen to them and support them and provide some assistance to them through just what we call psychosocial support. And those clinical social workers on the ground, as well as your community workers, as well as those who understand the policy and administration, must be used and integrated in such a way that we meet the needs of children like a Precious, or like a Lee Boyd Malvo, who never got the help he needed and got into trouble because of the Jamaican child welfare.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to read from my new novel, Daylight Come, and it's set in 2084 when it has become too hot to go outside in the day, and a mother and her daughter are considering leaving the capital city of Bana, and I'm going to read, it's the mother speaking. They called it different things: change, then crisis, followed by emergency. Then they changed it to disruption, then disaster. In the end, it didn't matter. Finally, they, and you never knew who they were, realized that the worsening climate converged with poverty, geography, and history. So now they call it the convergence. I was 11 and lived with my parents in the foothills overlooking Bana. Higher elevations were cooler, so we were luckier than others, and I believed we deserved it. Every night, my mother and father watched good-looking men and women on television report on melting ice, swirling snowstorms, cities swallowed by earthquakes. We saw people washed away by rivers that broke their banks, taking villages with them. We watched whole islands drown. All this was far away and had nothing to do with us. The decapitated mountains were not ours, nor were the children swept away by raging water. I remember, though, the sizzling morning I went to Ray Wharf with my mother and saw the fishers leaning against the rum shop, the women facing them with empty baskets, their faces slick with sweat. No more fish, the men said, but we have a few sea eggs. My mother responded that we were not that desperate. Not long after, the crops began failing and the fruit trees stopped bearing. We did try to grow some things in our garden, but they all died. I remember this one pumpkin vine which produced a flower and then a pumpkin. My parents watched it as if they were tending a sick child, and then one morning it was gone. Someone too hungry to wait, my father said. After that, the vine withered and died. The water supply failed in Bana, and I went with my father to the Amma River, which still had pools of water. Thousands of people lined its crumbling banks carrying containers. Rich people put pumps in the pools and sucked them dry into tanks in the back of their trucks. I remember we had to walk a long way to find a pool that was not stirred up. I went to campus school until I was 15. I was good at tech support. Halfway through my final year, the power supply could no longer support air conditioning, and I never went back. I remember the cars strewn around Bana after the roads melted until a storm lifted them and cast them into the sea. They stopped giving hurricanes human names the year of the Cat 5s. That storm was Theta 24. The pandemic of 2020 had already shut down country borders, but the viruses had found their animal hosts and they sickened us in waves. The animals we let loose to roam and graze the almost barren land mostly starved and died, then shriveled into ash. A few horses and mules survived and did not become feral, but the pigs and dogs that lived banded together in packs and began to hunt and feed on us. Then it became too hot to go outside in the day. The dust storm started and the sun began to blind and kill. Our neighbor Nima was the first I knew to die, a quiet, soft-spoken woman made cantankerous by thirst and hunger. She tried to scratch out her husband's eyes, and he threw her out. All we heard was the bang of the front door and then her screams. No one opened their doors to her. I still think of my father and the way he died. He was out all night at the seawall foraging for food, and daylight caught him there. He tried to get into one of the dawn bunkers, which still existed then, but the people inside would not open the door. I never saw his body, and I don't know how the Domins who brought the news knew who he was, because there was nothing left. All they gave my mother was his wedding ring. And for a long time I thought about his bones. I didn't believe the sun could destroy bones, at least not so quickly. And I imagined the gold ring loose around a finger bone against the blackened dust. I also thought about the food he might have found, which we did not get. I didn't witness what the sun could do to people until after Sorrel was born, and I was always sorry she saw it too. In this time of killing heat and hunger, there is no safety anywhere. Every day the sun comes up, it will blind or kill us if there is not a roof over our heads. Every day the Domins are on the hunt for young women, and the ferals can surround us and tear us apart. I'm 45, and the end is coming fast for me. What use am I without my daughter? Maybe the only thing I can give her is a chance to escape this hell, and to die with her would be better than to die here alone.
This is Blossom. I just wrote this poem to emphasize to you all how easy it is to communicate in our native language here in Jamaica. Sitting is a word you use for everything. If the sitting not work, you get sitting for fix it. If you can't find sitting, you say, you see the sitting? If something happen, you say, what a sitting? For sitting is a word you use for everything. Me will take sitting lick if you not find me sitting give me. For sitting must do you while you can't keep your hand off me sitting them. Find your own sitting and leave for me sitting alone. And when you're done, you go into the house see if you find sitting for cook. For I tell you, sitting, with all the sitting them that going on, you have a word for explain what you want to say. For sitting is a word you use for everything.
Chapter 1 of 12. You left that for this?
Jaws drop, eyes widen. The breathing may even pause for a nanosecond. You left that to do this? Pure shock. This was the usual reaction to my explanation of what I did before joining the Covenant Players, an international itinerant repertory theatre company. I gave up being a lawyer and diplomat in order to travel around Europe in an old van, live in other people's homes, and perform plays. What sensible person would do that? Wondered these Western Europeans. Did her parents know? Or even approve? Apparently it didn't matter that I was evidently over 18, over 25, and in fact in my early 30s. Why? They asked. My simple immediate answer was, to do something different. Think the British comedy series Monty Python, and now for something completely different? And what a different life it was. This book contains highlights drawn from personal journal entries and regular email updates shared with family and friends of my 2.5-year sojourn with the Covenant Players from January 2005 to June 2007. I toured with teams covering France, Spain, Switzerland, Denmark, and Sweden, performed in over 1,200 live shows in 5 languages, in over 200 different roles, and before audiences ranging in age from 7 to 90 years and in size from 3 to 5,000 people in any one performance. As part of an international community comprising Americans, Canadians, Norwegians, Germans, Swedes, French, Poles, English, Welsh, a Swiss, an Australian, and a Hungarian, we lived together, cooked, cleaned floors, babysat, drove thousands of miles, cried, got angry, prayed, sang, and acted in plays together. It was an unforgettable experience, a rewarding journey, and worth the risk taken. I hope that you'll find these stories a treasure chest of insights and perspectives on experiencing life.
Edna Manley carves Horse of the Morning from Drum Blair, Memoirs of a Jamaican Childhood by Rachel Manley. My grandmother's great apocalypse featured a horse. Everyone has one apocalypse, she told me, but you can miss it if you're not paying attention. My father hadn't had his apocalypse yet. My grandfather's was in the riots of 1938, and he was paying attention, she said. She had been alert for hers. It was long before I was even born. She woke up in the Blue Mountains early one morning, and there, rearing up in the sky behind Lady Peak, was a huge golden horse. She could see only his mighty neck and his head and a lifted foreleg, and his mane, which rose in a transcending exuberance of rippling light, tearing open a pale sky. He stood there, shimmering from the crest of a lunge all force and muscle, the moment of creation, the spiritual with the physical, the light with the solid, the given with the taken, all taught in the erotic moment when what has arrived has not yet left, and what yields has not yet let go, and what demands has not yet received. What loves still loves, and has not yet tired. He was there. All things met in him, the birth of day, the horse of the morning. There she was, with a horse in the sky that she knew she must keep forever. She pounded him out of a log of Guatemalan redwood, right up there in the hills. She was a sculptress, and after her family and her horses, she loved a log of wood best. It was an exclamation, all mane and mighty neck, huge eyes and lifted foreleg. She said It reminded her of my father. Only the brave shall see the horses of the morning, she told him, and gave him this carving as a lifelong challenge. I got to know the world through the eyes of the woman with horses in her hair. We shared the two men in the world who really mattered to me, but I knew they both belonged to her.
A poem for staying home, the yard. We live our lives among things that decay. In the yard, the carcasses of deportees became our refuge when we were afraid. Inside their rust fatigue is where we'd be, watching the emerald dragon dart its tongue to stab the diamondback spider that spun its silver in the hollows of the frame. We learned the normalcy of death and shame of sitting by powerless, worse, reluctant to intervene. Trapped in that web, we glimpsed darkness through the bangs of a flapping door. We felt dread forming from its metaphor, and our hearts grew giant. How memories seem to jab away at us, even as we live inside their rust. A poem to the dead. Today is a day of death. Some wake but none suppose that every mortal breath is looted from its chest. To every rubied face that never flints at cold, today is a day for death, so bring its sting inscrolled. The women come in tears with handkerchief and shirts turned inside out. They wear tape measures round the waist to tell the spirits who are lingering in air, you cannot live the two, love and eternity.
I believe historical fiction is important because it provides a direct conduit to our shared ancestral dreaming. It's only then that we can empathize as to why people behave the way they did and gain a deeper understanding of the society within which our past selves, dressed up as our characters, lived in, and how a perfect storm of events could give rise to ordinary people doing exceptional things. This excerpt is when William encounters Sam Sharp for the first time. Sam Sharp was a Baptist preacher, and he was a slave, and he was the one that started the rebellion in Jamaica in 1832. And that rebellion helped to have the abolition of slavery get passed through in Parliament. So it's a pretty big moment for William. He finally meets somebody that accepts him for who he is. Music. Music is the first sign we're getting close. Music calling out to us across the sunlight, drawing us ever upwards along a dirt track towards its crown. The little white stone church high up on the hill. A hill that rises steeply with green on every side. Calla tell me it's the Maroons that first discovered this hilltop place. And if you follow that little dirt track, it's going to take you safely all the way up north to the coast. All the way up to the famous town of Montego Bay. And when I look back on the morning I spend in that little white church, it's going to become like a sign to me. A sign that maybe life can move in another direction, just like little James's life did. Eliza, Stella and me had set out early in our Sunday best, walking along winding leafy trails, past hibiscus bushes in full bloom, some pink, some yellow, some red, past ravines filled with ferns and tumbling streams, enjoying the cool breeze on our skin before the sun wake up and bring him heat. It's the first time in a long time we walked together, and I noticed Eliza, how she no longer keep to childish ways. She's growing tall, broad-faced, have a sweet smile, Seems strong like Stella, maybe stronger, but have a gentleness that comes straight from the kindness in her heart. And as we get further from the plantation, the bitter grief wrapped tight round Stella's shoulders start to lift. Her face soften, and she start to look round, not hang her head, hoping the ground go and swallow her up. And far away from Massa's eyes, the shadow let loose him grip. Our insides stop trembling, our minds become not so fretful. We become like me hawk friend William II, our spirits circling free. Been a long time since he moved out of the valley where I found him. Must be made and have a family. As we get closer, we can hear that rickety old church organ pumping out all the notes, calling out, saying, "Come feed and drink from the soothing words of the Lord, to give strength to rise another day, no matter how hard the day before had been." Inside the church, after I help move the organ so more people can come in, the deacon asked me to take a cup of bush tea into the new pastor, Sam Sharp. He need a little pep up before the sermon. When I enter, Sam Sharp have him back to the door, looking out the window at the clouds moving slowly across the sky. Maybe he was a dreamer like I used to be, like James was. Then him turn round, and I know. The man in front of me is the biggest dreamer I ever going meet. Him look me up and down, like him seeing all of me, not just the flesh and bones of me, but the soul of me, the dreams of me, even the dreams I've been too frightened to dream. I step forward, feel how the sunlight surrounding his shoulders start to surround mine. Then Sam Sharp looked me straight in the eyes, not like how Master used to look at me, sideways, but directly, simply, like he is saying, "You and me, we are family. We are one."
My name is Kerese Oakley-Williams. I'm 16. I attend Sandra High School for Girls. I love to read. I love to write. I'm here today to present my book that I have recently published entitled Paradox. I wrote it in an effort to inspire other youths to choose the way of the Lord and just to do the right thing, and that it's okay to be a Christian, especially at a young age. And that is not a bad thing, it's fun. The paradox in Paradox is that it's being a teenager in this world, but you're not of this world. So the world has a lot of toxic natures such as violence, alcohol, drugs. But the book is in an effort to inspire you not to follow the ways of the world, but instead do the right things. My message to my fellow young people and future world leaders would be that you don't have to choose violence. You don't have to do the wrong things. I mean, yes, it's perpetuated in songs and they're always influencing us to take up the guns and to kill people, but we don't have to do that because the Lord doesn't want us to do that. He really does. He wants us to live in harmony and love each other, and so you don't have to do it. You can just do the right thing.
In the meantime, I'm heading off to Calabash, Jamaica's literary festival. There, I'm going to take the open microphone. I plan to share one of my poems I once thought was silly, titled "Labels Just Don't Fit," to a crowd of complete strangers who have no idea that I used to be afraid of sharing the words I put on paper. I'm not sure how they will react, but for me, reading my writing out loud will be the boldest step I have taken in a very long time.
High School Memories by Sheila Hill. My name then was Sheila Elaine Hill. I cannot take any credit for having chosen St. Andrew High, for having attended St. Andrew High, or for even having been a St. Andrew High School girl. It was all about my mother, Myrtle Dixon Hill, from a family of 10 and 2 of them teachers. The emphasis had always been on St. Andrews. Try to imagine that scene. My mother sitting on the front porch of the main office and refusing to leave until Sheila, her only daughter, became a St. Andrew girl. There was one time when I was leaving the school compound. It must have been about 3:30 that afternoon. As I exited by the gate near the school hall, I heard my name. It was Miss James, the ever-competent, ever-present Emery James. I did not even think she had known my name, but she did. Sheila, you might want to stay. I think there is something you might want to hear by 4 o'clock. At that voice, the voice of Emery James, I immediately turned around, returned to the hall and waited. I had no real idea what it was about. Then came Miss Stockhausen, stocky, businesslike, competent, with papers in hand. That's when I knew I had passed the Cambridge School Certificate. I was so excited. My friend Judy Willoughby was there. Judy, bless her heart, offered to run home with me to tell my mother. No cell phones in those days, guys. And so we ran. Down Cecilia Avenue, across the now dangerous Halfway Tree Road with afternoon traffic, and down Cargill Avenue, across Maxfield Avenue, and onto Queen's Avenue where I lived. We never stopped. We never spoke until we hit my front porch. Then I saw my mother. Her face lighted up. "What is it?" she asked. A breathless Judy Willoughby gave her the news. "Sheila has passed." "Calm down," my mother said. "I want to know the details." I always will be grateful to Judy. She might not remember the moment, but that shared joy with another St. Andrew girl has managed to shape all the moments in my life which followed, when some success or other has been realized. Remembering the Pioneers. Michelle Cliff, 1946 to 2016. Born in Jamaica, Michelle Cliff attended St. Andrew High School between the years 56 and 1960, and then went on to study at Wagner College and the Warburg Institute at the University of London, where she completed her PhD on the Italian Renaissance. Attuned to the constraints and contradictions of her independent homeland and the USA where she resided, she went on to craft in her writing career many critically acclaimed books and essays confronting issues of societal inequity and oppression, with a rare passion and a boldness for a woman writer at that time. She loved Jamaica and was sad about aspects of it that made her decide not to return. I wonder if I ever will return. I bear in mind that you, with all your cruelties, are the source of me, and like even the most angry mother, you draw me back. This is her from the land of Look Behind, an odd but telling title of Cliff's own commitment to her island home and her understanding that there is always something else to see, something else to look behind for. She kept looking and looking. Perhaps Claire, the girl of Abeng, found what Michelle Cliff, the writer and woman, was not able to grasp, and held on for dear life. This tribute to Cliff was paid by her friend and fellow Jamaican writer, Opal Palmer Adisa, based on an interview conducted in 1994 in the United States, in Santa Cruz, where Michelle Cliff was to live the last 20 years of her life before her death in 2016. Abeng gives us Michelle Cliff's clearest statement of philosophy when she writes, "To write the complete Caribbean woman, or man for that matter, demands us retracing our African past, reclaiming as our own and as our subject a history sunk under the sea or scattered as potash in the cane field, or scattered, gone to bush, trapped in a class system notable for its rigidity and absolute dependence on color stratification, a past bleached from our minds. It means finding the art forms of those of our ancestors and speaking in the patois forbidden to us. It means realizing our knowledge will always be wanting. It means also, I think, mixing in the forms taught us by the oppressor, undermining his language and co-opting his style and turning it to our purpose." Professor Sylvia Wynter. King's College London has recently honoured their Jamaican alumni, Professor Sylvia Wynter, referring to her as one of the most important and influential thinkers and public intellectuals of our time. In June 2018, the college mounted a 2-day conference on her, the first ever of its kind in the United Kingdom, added her profile to the college's Hall of Fame, and awarded her an honorary doctorate. Sylvia Wynter, born in May 1928, started her journey in her homeland Jamaica at St. Andrew High School, which in June 1946 declared a holiday to salute her for winning the Jamaica Centenary Scholarship. She went on to King's College London in 1947 to study Spanish. After graduating with a master's degree, Wynter wrote for the BBC, acted in radio dramas, was a member of the influential and visionary Bosco Holder Dance Company, and completed several plays, including Under the Sun, which was written for the Royal Court Theatre. While in London, Wynter also began to work on her highly regarded novel, The Hills of Hebron, 1962, an exploration of a Jamaican community shaped by both Christian revivalism and modes of spirituality associated with African heritage. She moved in her career from work in London as a playwright and a BBC commentator in the 1950s and 1960s to her service to the first Jamaican independent government as a writer and a public intellect in the 1960s and 70s. Professor Wynter is renowned especially for her unusually wide range of interests. She's been a novelist, playwright, dancer, actress, critic, educator, philosopher, and essayist. Anthony Rodriguez, her biographer, visited the Emory James Museum in 2018, researching her early life and early influences. Standing where Sylvia and her St. Andrew community celebrated in 1946 was a moment of empathy and recognition. He said, "Professor Wynter is offering us in the early 21st century her vision of a new understanding of what it means to be human," explaining that Wynter's argument is that being human is not just based on biology, but is rooted in storytelling, in our capacity as a species to narrate our social worlds and bring them into reality and existence. She has spent decades reiterating the historical urgency of moving beyond this kind of humanism that strictures our politics, our institutions, our economy, and to move beyond this to something new. The seeds of that humanism are in the traditions of the formerly enslaved people, the black peasants, the poor, folks who have been structurally marginalized. Professor Sylvia Wynter was awarded the Order of Jamaica in 2010 for her contribution to education, history and culture, and she is a University of Stanford Professor Emerita.